Hi everyone, so today we're going to be reviewing what we already saw last class, last live session, which is the lymphatic system. At the very end of this video, I'm also going to give you your instruction for today's assignments. As I am lecturing on this video, please pause whenever you are confused about something and rewatch certain sections that you get confused with, and also please take some notes, okay? So as we already know, the lymphatic system has three main functions, and it is those main functions can be related to your circulatory system or your immune system. So it's a system that is connected to both circulation and immunity. So it's kind of a system that is complementary to other systems, and that's also why the lymphatic system is so difficult to understand for a lot of people. So we're going to start off with how it is connected with the circulatory system when it comes to its function of reinserting the fluid loss that occurs in the circulatory system in the capillaries every time there is substance exchange. So if you remember this image, we talked a lot about this image because this is how your capillaries actually exchange all of the material to the tissues outside and can get the waste from the tissues inside to the capillaries to take it to the veins and to be disposed of. So in this case, you have this is the arterial end, if you recall, of this capillary. This is the vein end of the capillary. When blood enters the arterial end of the capillary, it has a lot of pressure. If you recall, that's called hydrostatic pressure. So a lot of the fluid, which the fluid part of blood is plasma, is going to exit into the interstitial space, into the space in between the capillaries and the tissues. And with it, it's going to take oxygen and any of the nutrients that these tissues might need. So that pressure makes this fluid exit. When the fluid exits, it gives the oxygen and all of the nutrients to the cells. And then since there is a loss of pressure inside of these capillaries, then the interstitial fluid, which is outside, increases in pressure since it just received a little bit of fluid from the capillaries. That means that the fluid outside re-enters the capillary. So the interstitial fluid on the outside re-enters the capillaries near the vein end of the capillary, creating a transport of all of the waste products from the tissues into the capillaries. The problem here emerges from the fact that more fluid exits, a higher amount of fluid exits than the fluid that re-enters, okay? So that means that there is a total net loss of fluid in the circulatory system. Here, you had more plasma in the blood than the amount of plasma that you have here, just because a lot of that plasma exited into the interstitial space, while some of it returns, but not all of it. The actual percentage of loss is 10%. So you lose every single time that there's this substance exchange, you lose 10% of the fluid from the blood to the interstitial space. So how can we recuperate that 10%? That is where the lymphatic system allows us to recuperate that 10%. Right over here, the capillaries, as you can see, there is an exiting of the fluid, of the plasma of the capillaries, and then there is a re-entry of the fluid, but not all of it, right? So some of the plasma that then exits into the interstitial space and becomes interstitial fluid will enter the lymphatic system, the lymphatic vessels, and be transported to the circulatory system, to a drainage area, which is actually close to your neck, okay, where it can be drained right back into the circulatory system so that there is no net loss of this fluid. Okay, so what does that kind of look like? If this were to be happening in a capillary in the lung, for example, this would be your capillaries. This is where all of the exchange is happening, and then there's a loss of this fluid based on this exchange. So if you can see, the capillaries are surrounded by lymphatic capillaries. Okay, they're tiny, tiny lymph vessels that take in all of that lost fluid and then can transport it through larger lymph vessels, until it actually merges with a vein in your neck and drains all of that fluid back, reinserting the fluid into the circulatory system. How does it do so? These are lymphatic vessels. Remember that lymph is traveling against gravity since it wants to drain in an area near your neck. So as it is moving, it is actually moving upwards because of muscle contractions, and it prevents moving downwards because of valves. So the movement of lymph is in the following way: segmented. It goes up a little bit because of a muscle constriction, and then the valves close shut, preventing the lymph from going right back down. So this is kind of how that lymph is being drained. The entire right part of your body, except for your right legs and your right abdomen, lower abdomen, is actually drained by all of these little tiny lymphatic vessels that join together to become a big lymphatic duct. Okay, now the left side of your body is going to be drained in the same way. All of the little tiny lymphatic vessels will accumulate into a lymphatic duct right over here. But remember that the left side of your body will also include the left drainage part of your body, will also include your right leg. Okay, so it is kind of asymmetrically drained. Okay, and what you can see right over here is that this is the lymphatic duct that has accumulated all of the lymph from all of this part of the body, and it pretty much merges into the vein of your neck, which is called the right subclavian vein, right over here in the right part of your body. The same thing for the left part of your body. All of the lymph accumulates into these lymphatic ducts that are merged into the left subclavian vein right over here, and then just that lymph has been reincorporated into the circulatory system, and there has been a balance of fluids in the circulatory system, which is called homeostasis. Okay, we're not going to go into this much because we're actually going to be seeing the immune system in detail later on. But please remember that there's also a very big function of immunity in the lymphatic system, since you've got all of these nodes and all of these organs that can store and can transport immune system cells, white blood cells, so that they can combat disease. And also remember that there is a third function of the lymphatic system, which is the absorption and transportation of fats from the small intestine. So in the small intestine, you're going to have lymphatic vessels, and those lymphatic vessels are actually going to transport some of the fats that have been processed in the small intestine and are going to be able to transport that into the circulatory system. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to see is just the organs of the lymphatic system. We've already seen this. We didn't talk about the liver that much. We'll talk about that later on. Please remember that you have also the spleen. You have this little thymus gland right over here. Then you have lymphatic systems of nodes and vessels all over your body. Okay, and you also have bone marrow. So bone marrow can be found obviously in every bone, but some of the most important ones actually come from your hips. Okay, the ones that produce the most red blood cells and white blood cells come from your hips or arms, legs, and such. Okay. In each one of these lymphatic vessels, remember that you've got that fluid called lymph, which is super, super clear, almost yellowish in color, but very transparent. Okay. This is a good image of where all of the organs are placed of the lymphatic system. The thymus is right over here in the upper thorax. The spleen is right over here below the rib cage. If you can actually see this, this would be a blow-up image of a lymphatic node. So you've got the lymphatic vessel that actually opens up into a node, and this is kind of what the node looks like. It's got a lot of lymphatic vessels, and it is tied up with different tissues and different capillaries and such. Okay, you've also got lymphatic nodes, which are very important. Of course, we've talked about the tonsils, which are near your mouth, but there's other lymphatic nodes which are also very important, which is the adenoids. And I'm going to actually ask you to draw an adenoid, so please know that they are kind of in the back towards your nasal cavity. You can Google where they are if you're having a little bit of trouble knowing where adenoids are. This is another image of your lymphatic node. Okay, you can see where they can be placed. The spleen, it's right over here connected to your lymphatic system. the tonsils very near your mouth, and you can actually see them whenever they're inflamed, whenever they're swollen up. Sorry for the use of an incorrect word. Whenever they're swollen up, you can see them, okay? And they're swollen up because they are trying to transport as much lymph and white blood vessels, cells, sorry, into that area so that it can combat the bacteria that is causing you illness. The thymus would be located right over here. It allows you to, it is the site of maturation of some of the immune system cells. We'll talk about that later on. And the bone marrow, again, it can be located in your legs, in your arms, in your hips, okay? And inside that bone marrow, you can see that there's a production of red blood cells, there's a production of white blood cells, there's a production of platelets. So it's an extremely, extremely important organ. Okay, so for today, what you guys are going to be doing, your assignment, which is already posted on Schoology, it'll be called Lymphatic System Components Diagram. What you guys are going to be doing is you're going to have, the assignment looks kind of like this. You're going to label and color the following lymphatic system components: the thymus, the lymphatic nodes, just the tonsils and the adenoids. You do not need to find other lymphatic nodes. Bone marrow, again, not all bone marrow, but at least some, maybe in the hips or in the legs. Spleen, lymphatic vessels, again, not all lymphatic vessels, but an example of lymphatic vessels. And lymph, again, not all lymph, but an example of lymph. You do not need to draw all the lymphatic vessels or nodes, as I told you, just an example. You can print the worksheet from Schoology, print it out if you have a printer, and draw on top of this diagram of a human being. And if you do not have a printer, that's not a problem. Simply sketch this diagram of a human out in a separate sheet of paper and label and color on top of your sketch, okay? Once you guys are done, you're going to submit, please submit in Schoology a picture of your work, okay? So you are submitting this in Schoology so I can grade it and I can see how you did, and it is going to be done by hand, okay? So if you have any questions, please just let me know, and have a great day, guys. Hopefully that was helpful.